Welcome back, it's the Bionicle Inspiration Series, but it's also Halloween time. It's the start of October, and so hey, let's do a spooky, scary, exciting episode. Let's go. Today is sort of kind of a Halloween-themed episode, but I'm mainly going to focus on the sort of the spooky and the scary stuff. Kind of sort of monsters adjacent, I don't know. This is a kind of all-encompassing theme. But it's fitting for the time. It's topical. It's all that sort of stuff. So get ready for some spooky, scary mocks. And in general, if you want to get a bit of get in the Halloween spirit, want to have a bit of fun, this might give you some ideas for ways that you can build some spooky, scary, terrifying-looking mocks and monsters and things. So without further ado, let's dive in and let's see what some of these other builders are doing, and you can get inspired. Let's go. The very first mock we have today is by Patron, and it's called Scorned Wretch. This mock is, I think, wonderfully fitting for this theme. The fact that it is almost sort of, like deformed and has like sort of just this weird kind of pose and posture and limbs going in different directions and more limbs than it should even, I think is perfectly fitting for that of a spooky, scary monster of sorts. That's always something I say whenever I do episodes sort of focusing on like bad guys or monsters or terrifying creatures and things, is the idea of trying to make it less humanoid, less like a typical human. Because that's kind of what you see on monsters, they walk on all fours, they have spikes on their back, they have like two heads or really big eyes or massive teeth or whatever. It's stuff that a human doesn't normally have. So because it's not like us, we're a little bit more afraid of it, And I think that's quite fitting for this, because it almost kind of looks like it could be human, but it's not, because it has that hunch, it has the multiple arms and limbs and it's formed in ways like that. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's what takes this into that sort of spooky or scary realm. So by all means, if you want to dive into that, I reckon that's really worth looking into. What sort of ways can you make it very non-humanoid? What ways can you make it look just odd and out there? Can you put spikes all over it? Can you give it multiple limbs? Because I think it's going to go a long way. It certainly does on this mock here. So some other stuff that I like about it are the kind of like rings and chains on this mock. Just the fact that it sort of has these Ninjago like spinner pieces that work really well as sort of little like, I don't know, bracelets almost. I don't know. I see them as sort of like spiked like chains that have been wrapped around the arm as sort of like handcuffs of sorts. Which kind of begs the question, like, okay, how did it get that? Was it chained up because it was this, beast that was attacking people and it had to be imprisoned? Or was it some sort of weird experiment? Maybe that's why it's deformed in some fashion. I don't know, Or maybe it's a bit more of a sad story. Just because it's deformed doesn't mean that it's a bad, scary monster. No, let's not judge a book by its cover here. But, hey, maybe it's a bit of a sort of Frankenstein's monster sort of thing, and it's just a kind of victim of some other evil person. But even still, that kind of fits with the theme of Halloween to some degree. So, yeah, by all means, pay attention to the backstory that you want to put behind it and see how that could influence the mock. I don't know. So it's just interesting that alone, all that sort of stuff. And I'm already conjuring up a bit of a story for it. It's pretty cool. So all that sort of stuff can go a long way on your own mocks, that's for sure. But yeah, in general, I think it's a really nice part use using that spinner piece there for sort of like spiked gauntlets of sort. Not really a gauntlet, you know what I'm saying, little cuff things. It's good. They also have kind of similar ones on the legs, and they're using a bit more of a sort of modern piece, which is this sort of like round 2x2 brick with spikes all along the edge there. It's a really interesting, unique piece, and I think it works well as little, anklets or little... I don't know, things on their feet. It looks cool. I don't know whether or not that's some sort of like addition that's been, that they're wearing, like some sort of ornate jewelry or something. I don't know. It looks cool. I think the spiked aesthetic works very nicely. So I like that. I also quite like the choice with the legs there. They weren't specifically built to have that sort of pigeon-toed look to them, where the feet are sort of hobbling along in an almost sort of like zombie-like fashion, where they're not, they're at an odd angle. And that's simply just done through the posing on the mock as well. You could very easily repose that and it would be standing normally. But yeah, it's not, and it's very effective. So again, I think that's something else to consider when you're photographing your mock. How do you pose them, and then what can that say about the character? Again, it's little stuff like that, but I think it always goes a long way. So definitely don't just sort of whack your mock up on your desk or whatever and get your phone out and take a quick picture. Put a bit of thought into it, whether that's with the lighting or not. Just, hey, okay, how do I want it to look? What sort of stuff do I want to communicate? How do I say this? I'm a graphic designer by trade, so like that's a big thing with me when I do my work. It's always, okay, why have I made this choice? Yes, I'm designing this pretty picture. Yes, I'm doing this branding for this business or whatever, but like, why? You can't just be like, red's a cool color. Like, sure, I'll put it in my mock. No, you've got to have justification behind that, you know? So I think that's the same thing when you're photographing your mock. All right, he's standing just with his arms by his side. Why? Is this just some sort of ordinary dude, or do I want to showcase this mock as a scary dude? All right, how can I make him look scary? And I understand that might be a little bit like, how do you make something look scary? Give it a Google. Google, I don't know, scary monsters or, scary poses or something like that. Looking at other references and inspiration like that can always go a long way. And by all means, you won't always have the answers, so do a bit of research and stuff. Yeah. Bit of a tangent there, I know, but still, that's always something I enjoy about filming these Bionicle Inspiration Series episodes, is that it's like, there's little things, but you can really learn a lot from them, even if it's, seems sort of like second nature to the builders. You yourself can dive into these mocks and really study the techniques, study what it is that they're physically doing, how they photographed it, all that stuff, and it can really influence your own work. So it's pretty cool. Some other stuff I like about this mock that makes it creepy and cool, the awesome teeth design, using some of those tan gears. They look perfect for teeth. They're amazing. I think one of the other mocks in this episode has that same sort of tooth design. It just works so well. So bring out some of your gears and different things and use them for teeth. It's very, very fitting. And teeth come in a variety, gears come in a variety of different sizes, so you can use them for a variety of different sizes of teeth as well. So you can have it be quite small or quite large, whatever you want, whatever fits whatever it is that you're building. So that's also quite sort of, nice to know in that regard. I also like that he has the tongue poking out like that. It is naturally quite large, and it is at that sort of unique angle as well, I suppose. So again, it does make it look a little bit more exotic and different in that regard, but quite fitting, and also the eye design on this head here. The fact that they are different sizes like that certainly makes it look crazy. It's kind of like a cartoon when a creature's eyes start to bulge or whatever, because I don't know, they've seen an attractive person, or they're freaked out and their eyes just do some crazy weird thing. That's sort of visual storytelling in animation. So it's cool to see it kind of translated here on this mock here, and it does make it look like he's, I don't know, there's something scary about it. The fact you can see the pupils as well, I don't know, it's just a little bit weird and a little bit freaky, but it works so well. So really, really solid design there, and overall just a very expressive face. It's cool, it's really well done. So yeah, just in general, brilliant looking mock, a lot going for it, and it fits the idea very, very well. Also, the textures on the mock as well kind of reminds me of like a xenomorph, just how it's almost this sort of like leathery texture to it that's just a little bit too clean. You expect the monster to be a little bit more sort of like hairy or spiky, but there's something sort of pristine about it, and that's a little unsettling. At least that's the way I look at it, So it's cool. That smooth organic texture works really well here. So love your work. Let's move on to the next mock now. This is a weird one, but a great one. This is by Alex Park Designs, and this is called Top 10 Most Evil Warrior Cats. Yeah. So there's a reason that the mock is called that. Let me read the description here. So this was entered into a very specific contest where you had to have very specific rules. And let me read you some of these rules, because they're weird, but they're really cool. And I think it actually enhances the mock once you know them. So it says here, let me break it out for you and I'll read it to you. It says that this mock needed to be named by the opponent, and they had to put the description in as well. So there you go. That's why it's called this weird name, because the opponent was like, yeah, whatever. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, weird rules for this contest here. The mock had to include 5 broken parts, which I'll cover in a second here what those specific broken parts are. But while I talk, see if you can find all 5. I don't know if I even found all 5, so let's see if you can find some I don't. So yeah, it had to have that and that. It also needed to include a Star Wars CCBS Ultra Build headpiece, which here I believe he's used the Rey Star Wars Ultra Build headpiece there. It needs to have an anime, or as he described it, weeb-based theme song, which you can check out the post. There's a link in the description, so if you want to listen to the theme song while you look at this, knock yourself out. And it needed to include a bunch of non-LEGO related elements, which again, I'll cover in a second there. And the final thing, which I didn't fully understand, I'll read this straight off of the mock. Hopefully you can make more sense of it than I can. The sort of like thing for this was called the old switcheroo. You need to switch 2 parts of your build and keep them that way. And he says in brackets that he switched the torso and the head. So I don't fully understand that, but I guess the logic is the Rey head was supposed to be on the figure in the background, and the torso was I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me. And part of me is like, cool, if you did swap them, it actually works quite well, I reckon. So, be honest, I don't see it. But maybe that makes more sense to you guys. Regardless, there are a lot of different sort of checklists that he had to check boxes that he had to tick to build this MOC. And you know what? Sometimes that's the perfect stimulus for some people. Working creatively under specific circumstances where you have to meet specific criteria or build something within a time limit. Sometimes that works really well for people. Sometimes it doesn't work so well for some people. It's everyone's different, and the way you build and make art is different for everyone. So that might be something that would work really well for you. Myself personally, I probably wouldn't like it. Sometimes I like to just do what I want to do, and I don't want to have to necessarily fit into certain rules, But I think that's a great idea. If you're struggling with something, give yourself a time limit, enter a contest, try to fit within the guidelines or the rules of the contest, or put some sort of weird random circumstances in that you have to follow when you build your MOC, because sometimes, building creatively or doing something creative within restrictions can really help. So I really like that. I think that's just a great idea in general. And also some absolutely weird and obscure criteria that he's had to stick to here, which I think has actually really aided the MOC, because it's helped to make a really weird and obscure MOC in all the right ways. So I love it. So let's dive into the actual MOC itself. I think it was just interesting to cover that because it's quite unique for a MOC. You don't really see that level of specificity in other stuff, so that's pretty cool. So with this, he said that he used some non-Lego elements. So of course I reckon that is the scissors that he's using to sort of do this autopsy, I guess, on poor Not Ray that he's dissecting there. So that's cool, using those little sort of real life, little scissors there. Works quite well on the MOC and seems quite fitting. I almost thought that there was some obscure Lego thing, but I don't think they are. And then this thread as well, which he sort of built some Lego stuff around it. So again, it actually fits surprisingly well. But it's cool because this red thread reminds me of sort of two different things. One, it reminds me of just, I don't know, some sort of weird horror movie where someone does surgery on someone and has to stitch them up and maybe doesn't do it so well. And whatever happens in whatever sort of horror movie, it seems very fitting. But it also reminds me of, I believe it's called the Thread of Life. I think it's a Greek mythology thing. I don't know. I just remember it from the Hercules movie. Maybe Disney was just like, this is a cool idea. But the logic of it being before someone died, they took out the thread and they cut it. And that was them cutting off their life and killing them sort of thing. So it kind of reminds me of that too, that this weird, I don't know, four-armed deity or creature or something is literally sort of cutting someone's life. Cutting them off, cutting off their life support. I don't know. I feel like there's a metaphor where I can use cutting very nicely there, but it's not coming to me. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of sort of symbolism and imagery behind that works really well. So I think that was a wise choice to include that as the non-Lego element. Now, I can only see those two specific pieces being the non-Lego pieces. Even the cloth is official. If you spot more, the world's your oyster. Good job. Maybe the sort of cloth over the CCBS eye there is not Lego. It might be more of a rubber band or something. I can't tell what that is, but maybe that's not Lego as well. Still, those are the only things I can see there. But again, I think they were good inclusions for non-Lego related things, and it works quite well. I also like the idea that maybe you could actually find genuine Lego string or genuine Lego scissors that maybe came with some sort of Lego stationery thing or something, and you maybe actually could build a purist version of this. I don't know if that sort of stuff exists, but you get string in Lego sets, so possibly, and I'm sure there's some sort of official Lego branded stationery that you could use, do something like this with. So you could do a purist version of this. Always interesting to see something like that. So maybe. I also like the fact that, like you said, he used some of those broken pieces, and I think again, to good avail. So the ones I noticed, did you notice them too? We're playing a guessing game now. It's fun. Was the gold ornate dish on the torso there. It's got a big old hole smashed through the middle there, which who knows how that happened, but hey, that's there. So I think that's pretty interesting. It almost kind of looks like a little eye or something is poking through, so it kind of becomes the head of this MOC. So again, I think that was good, and by all means, you probably have some broken pieces in your collection as well. Instead of just discarding them or never using them, it's nice to give them life in a MOC. So I think it's really cool. If you take a look at the guts that are coming out of the MOC that's being cut up, there's a minifigure hand and arm, if you will. It's the 2-in-1. It looks like a little bit of it's broken. It looks like the bit that you specifically actually inserted into the torso is broken. And I think that's very fitting because it's guts. It's all the sort of icky blibbity-boo inside of a human, It makes sense that it's going to not look all that pleasant. So I think it was really a good inclusion to use that broken piece for that because it is just sort of this big mesh and weirdness inside there. So it's surprisingly fitting, I think. So great to see a broken piece getting a new home, as it were. And then also on the sort of like sacrificial table, which by the way looks magnificent. Some very, very nice detailing there on a more sort of system heavy, part of this MOC there. If you look towards the base there, some of the brown tiles are broken. Little bits of it there have been sort of snapped off, or even some of the plates as well have that same thing there. Unfortunately, that's just a thing with certain batches of brown Lego elements. They just break a lot more easily, and it's a little frustrating, but it's a thing. But if you contact Lego, they replace it, blah, blah, blah. Still, that's a thing that happens sometimes. And it's very similar to, the lime joints on certain Bionicle sets. That was the thing. They would often break. So, yeah, sometimes you get Bionicle and Lego pieces that just naturally are a little bit more flimsy because of the specific color and the type of plastic they used, blah, blah, blah. There's multiple reasons. And it's unfortunate, but instead of chucking it out or doing nothing with it, give it some life. And I think here is a beautiful example because it kind of does give it this sort of old wood texture that, maybe the wood is decaying a little bit, or it's just sort of really old and messed up or whatever. So I think it actually works quite well here, and it kind of adds to that sort of horror aesthetic as well, I think. So I think a beautiful example of using some broken pieces here. Absolutely lovely. Yeah. So really, really solid work there. And honestly, overall, I just think this MOC is just kind of really nice. Obviously, it's a little bit more graphic and a little bit more full-on, but we're talking Halloween here. This is the perfect time for this sort of thing. In general, even with all these restrictions, really, really solid looking MOC, really creepy looking, and just a really cool little scene in general. Very nice. Let's move over now to this MOC here, which is by Joxon, and this is called the Ironbound. I like this guy a lot, actually. I think this is diving into a fair bit of sort of almost like kind of iconography that sort of can be associated with more sort of creepy, scary monster Halloween stuff. There's some, I would argue, some kind of like devil, kind of like satanic iconography here with like that fiery ring behind him, that sort of like halo almost. There is sort of like a slight religious look to it. And even the sort of skull head there kind of looks a little bit like a goat or even like a cow skull to a degree. I'd argue more of like a goat, which is another sort of devil satanic thing. And in general, the very sort of skeletal elements of this MOC here, the rib cage, the heart, the fact that a good amount of this is white and it does look like kind of bones and stuff. It's very fitting and honestly pretty cool too. So yeah, all that sort of stuff, big horns, spider legs, all that sort of stuff. Perfect for your Halloween, perfect for your scary time. It's great. Even just the asymmetrical look of this MOC, the fact that the top half is white and it has a more sort of bony, smoother look to it that, looks like that of a skeleton, versus the bottom, which almost looks a little bit more like kind of mechanical. The texture itself is different again. It uses a lot of that sort of gear brick kind of piece. I don't know what you quite call that, but it has that sort of very kind of rigid, kind of greebly mechanical look to it. So to me, it seems more robotic in that regard. And the fact that, they're essentially spider legs on top of like a goat skeleton. Those two things should not be together, and yet they are. And I think that, again, easily communicates that of like a monster or a scary, spooky kind of thing. So very fitting for your Halloween. So yeah, by all means, I think it's a great idea to sort of just shove things together like that because there's something quite scary about it, and it works super, super well here. So really, really nice to see. And honestly, spider legs on anything, it just looks cool, doesn't it? So I like that. I also just, in general, like the kind of posing on this MOC as well. The fact that the hands are like bound together with a chain and it's sort of in a more sort of, I don't know, kind of angelic, regal kind of pose. Again, I feel like there's sort of more like kind of cultiness behind this MOC, especially this like ring of fire. It seems like some sort of summoning circle or something that's just, I don't know, culty and weird, So yeah, it's cool. It's cool. A lot of sort of like imagery and a strong focus on the shaping and the textures and the kind of contrast between different things on this MOC as well that I think really make this shine. So Joxon, he's kind of a master of his craft. This guy knows what he's doing and he's done it well. I think it's also interesting to note that this MOC shares some similarity with the first one we saw, the fact that its eyes are asymmetrical as well, one being a little bit bigger than the other and has a more sort of noticeable like pupil and that kind of yellow bit there. Interesting, and the other one's smaller. And also the gear teeth. I was right, this MOC does have some more gear teeth as well in tan. So interesting to note the similarities between all three of these MOCs here that we've seen so far. The fact that there's been sort of heavy use of the color black, the fact that there's been a lot of sort of like religious, satanic sort of like symbolism and imagery. There's been elements of the sort of like spikes and the teeth, and a really strong focus on like texture as well. I think it's just interesting to think about that there is some sort of commonality there between all the sort of spooky and scary stuff. But maybe later we'll do something that's very deliberately against that. So stay tuned. But yeah, hey, I think this is a fantastic mock by Joxon, and Joxon never disappoints, so love your work. Let's move over now to a mock by J. Koo Builds, and this is called Spooky Skeleton Summoning. So again, similar in nature to the one we saw before. The next one might not be. And it's, the black color scheme, very strong kind of skeletal look to it. Big old mono eye as well, which I think is noticeably different and noticeably non-human, so very fitting. And he's got some snazzy flame hair too. Nothing wrong with snazzy flame hair. Love it. I think this is a fantastic mock. And I think obviously it's taking a lot of inspiration from a sort of very basic human skeleton. And he's done a good job too, really. I think this ribcage design itself is very, very nice. Just using a lot of those, whatever they're called, they're sort of like curved connector pieces that have sort of different angles and orientations to them. Just repeating a bunch of those there really does match that beautiful looking ribcage effect. It looks magnificent. And I also like the fact that he's got sort of like posable toes, posable fingers. You don't really see posable toes all that much on mocks. It's not a common thing. I've seen it a few times on a few different mocks here and there, but it works really well. And in general, just all the different ways that he's sort of copied the anatomy of a typical skeleton. Whether it's the sort of like almost like, I don't know, dual piston design there on the hands, and similar elements to that on the legs as well. So it's just a really nice kind of recreation and sort of like slight playing with it of a typical skeleton. And hey, the skeletons are very commonly associated with Halloween, so very fitting for the time as well. I also really enjoy the choice of the piece for the kind of like pupil on this mock here on his sort of cyclops eye. The fact that it is that trans blue 1x1 round tile element there. But it has that kind of print over it too. I believe it's from an Ninjago set, and there are a few different pieces similar to this that had different prints on them of sort of different elemental things. This one sort of is just this sort of like kind of curvy, almost sort of like whirlwind design. I think it looks perfect. I think there's something wonderfully sort of mystical and horrific about it that is very fitting for it, and works with the general concept of this being something that's sort of like summoned, or this sort of terrifying creature that's been summoned that has sort of like magical powers. And I like that little subtle bit of printing there that kind of can communicate more of that. I think it's awesome. But I think my favorite thing about this mock is the sort of base that it's sitting on. The fact that it really does look like it's sort of being summoned out of this book. And this creature is being brought into this mortal plane, and the fact that it is a kinetic sculpture as well that sort of moves, and the sort of rhythm and movement of that is so just electric, and it really does sort of help tell the story that this mock is trying to tell. And you see all those sort of kinetic sculptures built either in Lego or just out there in the real world as well. So it's cool to see that you can kind of add a little bit of power functions and movement to a mock and really enhance it in that regard. You don't see too much movement on Bionicle stuff. It's more of a sort of system focused thing if there is any movement, but there's no reason you can't do it with a Bionicle. I think this is a shining example of that. It's really, really well done. So, hey, if you can do something similar, if you're good with your motors and stuff, it might be worth doing. I myself, I've done a little bit of power functions and things in mocks, but not a huge amount of it. So, hey, if you can, give it a go, because I think it'll look very swell. So yeah, love this mock. Really, really well done. Let's move to a very different one now. This is a mock by Bodai Del Grossi, and this is called Red Dragon Mock. So I deliberately wanted to put something in this episode that was just very visually different to the others. I thought it was interesting to analyze and sort of discuss the similarities between all those mocks before that were, still different enough, but had a very sort of consistent sort of spooky Halloween-y theme. And then I just wanted to include something that still kind of fit, but still kind of didn't at the same time. Because, there is a sort of specific kind of Halloween aesthetic that you can go with. But, you could also just build a cool-looking monster or a cool-looking dragon dude, and it would still kind of sort of fit, As Obi-Wan Kenobi once said, there's more than one way to skin a womp rat. There's multiple different ways that you could approach doing something that's more sort of scary or spooky, and you can lean into different genres or approaches, So, I don't know, think outside the box or follow your bliss. Do the sort of thing that you are more excited to build. If you want to get into that Halloween spirit, find the way to do it that fits you best, Regardless, though, this is a really cool mock. Let's talk about it. Love me a good dragon. Especially love me a good humanoid dragon too, you know? Yeah, it's nice to see more sort of your wyverns or your typical kind of like four-legged dragons and stuff, you know? They all got different names and stuff, but yeah, I like a good humanoid dragon like this, especially with a really solid head design like this that is using some of those Borok teeth really well. You know, it's sort of a bit more of an older piece that you don't see used too much because there's a whole bunch of different sort of like tooth-related pieces in Lego sets, and yeah, some of them work better, I suppose, but like, I don't know, there's something wonderfully Bionicle-y about this. It just kind of takes me back to like early 2000s with, you know, the original Borok and other older Bionicle sets there. So I don't know, I love seeing sort of more outdated pieces being used on MOCs because, yeah, you could say it's outdated, but I would say it's creative and it's nice and there's a nostalgia to it. So by all means, if you've got a collection of Bionicle pieces that, some of the pieces are older, don't be afraid to use them. Still works really well, and this head design's fantastic. In general, too, a lot of the sort of overall kind of broad like silhouette of this MOC, the overall shaping of it is lovely. Specifically the areas where there's a lot of like pistons in the MOC, like specifically like on the legs and sort of kind of the back muscles as well. The pistons are really elegantly like incorporated into the MOC. They kind of blend nicely with the rest of the armor, so it kind of just looks like it's a part of it. The pistons aren't necessarily this kind of like afterthought that's sort of a little bit detached from the body, which they sometimes were in the official Bionicle sets, like Maxilos and Hydraxon had that occasionally. But no, I love it. It makes it look really sort of, yeah, you know, biomechanical, fitting for a Bionicle. And yeah, especially on the back there, I really like how those look because, I don't know, to me it kind of looks like when, you know, like a really muscular person will sort of like flex their back muscles and you can kind of see either just like the muscles or the bone underneath the skin and stuff like that. To me, it kind of looks a little bit like that there. And it's just really fitting and cool. And while we're looking at the back there, I also quite enjoy the way he's done the tail, how it sort of starts off as those two sort of separate Hero Factory like shells and bone pieces, and then it transitions into one sort of singular tail that flows out. So it's a nice way to sort of have that thickness be a bit larger towards the base and then building out to be sort of thinning out as the tail ends there. Just a really nice way of you know, making that design there. It's really cool. So yeah, overall, really solid overall look to this. Really great silhouette to this MOC, and I love a good dragon. So that's it for this episode, this Halloween-inspired episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. Probably might do a few more spooky, skeleton-y, monster-related episodes over Halloween, maybe. See how we go, see how you like this one. But by all means, leave a comment below if you've got a theme suggestion for a theme you want to see, whether it's Halloween related or not. Let me know, and I'll do my best to make it into an episode. See how we go. Anyway, that's it for this episode. If you want to check out some of the MOCs in this episode today, check the links in the description, and you can head over to their social media and browse even further and see what these builders have been doing. They're talented, and hey, there's some other stuff they've got. You should check it out. While you're in the description below, you can see some of my own social media as well, so be sure to take a look at that if you're interested. And while you're there too, you can see links to my Patreon. You can see links to all the other stuff I got going on. So have a look, have a browse. There's also the submission email in the description below. It's also on your screen right now. So if you have MOCs you want to see on the show, you can submit them through that email. Very good. That's it for this episode today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for listening. Happy building, and bye for now.